I'm turning an ordinary kit into an extraordinary structure on Ron's Trains and Things right now. Hi, I'm Ron of Ron's Trains and Things, and if you'd like to see more model railroad tips, tools, and techniques, then be sure and subscribe down below and click the little bell icon so you can catch future videos. I have done a number of structure builds over the time that I've been doing this channel and shared with you kit bashes and scratch builds, but it's not too often that I share with you just a regular old kit build. Well, today I'm going to do exactly that, only I'm going to try to make this ordinary kit something a little extra special as it comes on my layout. I've got a few techniques that I want to share with you, and I think they'll really help you as you try to take maybe some kits and try to make them a little less like all the other versions of the kits that you see on other people's layouts. Do you have some techniques that you use to make your kits look a little different from everybody else who has the same kit? Tell me about your experiences in the comment section down below. Now, let's head on over to the workbench as I show you exactly how I turn this ordinary kit into an extraordinary structure. As I build up my Fort Worth, Texas scene on my layout, I needed some background structures to represent some older, low-income apartments that skirt along the edge of downtown Fort Worth. Walthers' Parkview Terrace Tennement kit is perfect for this, so I'll be building two of these structures exactly alike to represent the apartments in this area. Opening the first kit, you'll see the parts, including separately applied window frames, and the key feature of this apartment, the wooden staircases and support structure. The brick detail of the exterior walls is highly detailed and looks fantastic. In-scale brick is often oversized or distorted, but this kit will make a very nice looking structure, so I decided to go the extra mile in painting and detailing the structure just to make it look as fantastic as I can. I started by cutting the wall sections, stair support structure, and landings from the sprue using my flush cutting sprue tweezers. These are an awesome tool that I bought from Micromark. You can find a link to this tool in the description down below, as well as a promo code that's good for 10% off this or any regularly priced items at micromark.com. I sanded the gates and any flash off of the edges of the parts with a fine sanding stick. As I did, I attached each piece to a painting handle with painter's tape, sticky side up. I sorted the pieces into three separate painting handles based on the type of material they would be made of. Wood pieces on one handle, concrete pieces on another, and metal pieces on a third. I plan to use a chipped peeling paint effect on the wood and metal parts of the structure, so I started with painting a base coat. On the wood parts, I used a light gray to represent primer that would be underneath the paint, and for the metal parts, I used a rusty brown color. I also painted all of the concrete parts with aged concrete paint by Model Masters. I also masked the brick walls and painted the foundation that same aged concrete color. When the base coat had cured for several hours, I applied Ammo of MIG Scratches Effect chipping fluid to the wood and metal parts. I applied a good heavy coat that left the parts wet but not running or dripping. I painted the wood window frames using the same method, but I painted them on the sprue, applying the same gray base coat and chipping fluid. When the chipping fluid was dry, I applied the finish coat of paint. For all of the wood and metal parts, I used Cascade Green. When the top coat was completely dry, I applied the chipping effect by using a stiff bristled brush, applying some water to the surface, and then gently scrubbing the surface until the finished paint began to chip away. I recently made another video detailing how this process works, which you can see in the card link at the upper right-hand corner of your screen right now. If you haven't seen that video, be sure and check it out after you finish watching this one. I really like how this effect worked on the wood parts of the structure. It left a very realistic effect of chipped paint that has faded and peeled away from primed wood. The doors and windows took time to peel as there were so many of them. I didn't want to get too aggressive with them and peel away too much paint. It turned out I was unable to finish all the doors and windows in one session and had to come back a couple days later to finish the process. But the effect worked just as well even after setting for a couple of days. It just took a little longer and a little more effort to get the paint started to peel. I used the same process on the metal downspouts, peeling away some bits of the top paint to reveal some of the rust color below. When it was time to paint the brick wall sections, I masked off the foundation which I had previously painted, and I first applied a ghost gray wash of 10% paint and 90% isopropyl alcohol to color the mortar joints. This leaves the walls looking gray at this point. When that gray had completely dried, I dry brushed the brick surface with a terracotta color that I had mixed myself from several different colors of paint. I loaded up a brush and took most of the paint off on a paper towel. Then I applied the paint to the surface of the bricks, not allowing paint to flow down into the gray mortar joints. The result of this process yields the best looking brick wall structure that I have been able to achieve with any process on N-scale brick. I painted the windowsills aged concrete using a superfine microbrush. When all the walls were completely cured, I used a series of colored pencils to color individual bricks. This is where the generic-looking brick model becomes a spectacular-looking, unique model. I experimented with different colors, but found that a mixture of red, brown, and orange yielded the best-looking results. This process took some time, but the results were well worth it. This is a rather tedious process. It required an optivisor and plenty of light to see what I was doing to control the color on individual bricks. With the brick walls painted, it's time to install the doors and windows. I again used my flush-cutting tweezers to remove the painted, weathered doors and windows from the sprue. The windows and doors install from the back of the walls. They have large mounting flashes and are recessed into the back of the walls, which makes them really easy to install. The frames all have arched tops, so I pushed every frame into place and then checked to make sure that it was fitted properly. I then glued them in place from the back with solvent cement and a microbrush. I also installed the brick portions to the top inside of the parapet walls at this point. I normally do not like to use the thick, clear styrene window glazing material that comes with kits like this one, but in this case I have no intention of detailing the interior of the structure, so I decided to go ahead and use it since it was there and readily available. I simply broke it from the sprue using the score marks that came from the factory. To glue the glazing into the window frames, I used canopy glue. Solvent cement or CA both will tend to cloud the windows and give an unnatural look, but canopy glue is like white glue in that it does not react with the plastic of the glazing and cloud it. Plus, it remains slightly tacky and dries clear. I applied a thin line of the canopy glue to the frames, then set the glazing into place. If any of the glue squeezed out onto the visible portion of the glazing, I simply scraped it away with the point of a toothpick. I decided to do some initial weathering at this point before I assembled the structure. I used Monroe Weathering Powder's Grimy Black to add some streaks to the top and side of the parapet walls and below the corners of some of the windows. I applied the powders with a microbrush applicator brush. If you're not experienced with weathering powders, be careful, and you might want to practice on some scraps before you work on an actual model. Load up some powders on your brush, but then take most of it off on a paper towel, similar to a dry brushing technique that you would use with paint. Build up the powders slowly, as it is easy to get too much, and unlike pastels or chalk, this product will not come off easily once applied. I continued to streak some of the powders onto the foundation and various places where rainwater would run and cause weathering. Finally, it was time to start assembling the structure. I used the supplied foundation and floor to line up the wall sections. The brick outer walls were beveled on the corners, but it is crucial to make sure that the corners match up perfectly in order to keep the brick effect looking believable. I found it easiest to line up the wall sections and cement them to the floor first, and then work my way up the corners, matching them perfectly as I went and gluing them with solvent cement from bottom to top. I started on one end and worked my way all the way around to the other end of the structure. With the walls installed, I turned to the landings. The walls have mounting ledges for aligning the landings. Simply line them up and cement them in place from the bottom. Next came the interior stair support structure. It fits into the landings like a puzzle piece and then is cemented in place wherever I can reach with a microbush in a place that would be out of sight. The staircases, surprisingly, proved to be one of the trickiest parts of assembly. It was awkward trying to hold them in place while gluing, and the area where they need to be cemented is quite small. I found it easiest to cement the bottom of each staircase in place first, then align and cement the top. The roof access ladder was tricky to install as well because the mounting pins are quite small and hard to reach with the cement. There's a small handrail that must be installed to the top floor support structure before the outer support structure can be applied. The outer support structure is finally installed, again gluing anywhere that can be reached with a microbrush and is out of sight. The last portions of the stairs are the 3 steps up to the first floor landing and the handrail for them. The downspouts are mounted into mounting holes on the front walls and cemented in place with an extra fine microbrush and some cement. I added a little more weathering under the downspouts using Monroe Powder's Dark Rust. I added some small light streaks of rust under some of the rusty patches that I had made on the downspouts earlier. Turning to the roof, I wanted to simulate a rolled tar paper and asphalt roof. To model the tar paper, I cut a piece of tissue paper slightly wider than the roof, then marked and cut strips that were 4 scale feet wide. I attached the strips to the roof with simple white glue. I brushed a thin layer of the glue onto the plastic roof piece, then applied the tissue paper, making sure it was straight, and gently smoothing it with a clean, dry brush. Each successive strip overlapped the previous strip by approximately 1 scale foot. Make sure that you begin this process on the downhill side of the roof, as water will need to run in that direction and would run under the tar paper if it were put on backwards. I cut the roofing around the roof access hatch and worked along all the way across the roof, then trimmed the excess tissue paper off of each end. When the glue was dry, I painted the roof grimy black, which didn't get filmed. Here, however, after the paint was dry, I used an oily black color to paint along the overlap lines on the roofing to simulate asphalt sealant along those lines across the roof. I purposely didn't worry about getting them perfectly straight, as typically they are not straight on a real roof. I painted the roof access hatch with some metallic silver craft paint. I had a couple of air conditioning unit details on hand, so I decided to add one to the roof of each one of these kits. To improve the realism of the part, I made a wash of flat black paint and applied it to the grating to bring out the detail. I also weathered the unit a bit with some Monroe Powder's Dark Earth and applied it to the roof with some canopy glue. Finally, I installed the roof to the structure. The last pieces to apply were the tile caps on the top of the parapet walls. Removing them from the sprue and sanding the gate smooth, I painted them with boxcar red and cemented them in place. I should say that the kit included optional parts for modeling stairs down to a basement door, but on my layout I don't think they would be visible at all, and they would require me cutting a hole in the base of the layout for the basement. I opted not to include them at this time, but they can be added later if I change my mind. And that completes my assembly of this model. I do plan to add some LED lights above each of the floor landings, as well as some window treatments to all the windows and some other outdoor details as I finish this scene, but those will be the subject of another video. Well, I am really pleased with how this structure came out. I think some of the details that I added with the painting, with the colored pencils, and some of the other things really makes it stand out. And I'm looking forward to getting the second one built, getting this scene completed, adding some other details, and I'll show you exactly what I do and how I do it whenever I get that far. Now, these are some techniques that you can employ as well in order to make some of those run-of-the-mill structures that you may have look different than any other structure on any other layout, even though it may come from the same kit. So I hope you'll give some of them a try. Well, if you enjoyed this video, here's a link to some more structure building videos that I think you'll enjoy as well. Also, be sure and take a look at the description down below. There you'll find my brand new MicroMark promo code that will save you 10% on all regularly priced items at micromark.com. You'll also find my Amazon page, my Amazon pick of the week, some great products that I really enjoy. I think you will as well. You'll also find a link to my Patreon page and places where you can connect with me on social media. Well, be sure and join me each Tuesday as I bring you more great model railroad videos, and I look forward to seeing you then. Lizzie?